Hey everyone, make sure to stay tuned to the end of this episode where Matt and I are going to go through and answer the most popular questions and comments from last week's episode. Hi there everyone, welcome to another episode of MJ Sailing, where this week we are focusing on bulkheads. And I've got bulkhead number 2 next to me here. Got some fun plans for it later this afternoon. And you might be asking yourself, aren't they kind of skipping a stage by jumping right to this instead of adhering the boat? The problem is we're still waiting on the methacrylate bonding agent that will attach all of the hull pieces together. And because there has been a lot of shortages of raw materials, our distributor is still waiting to get theirs, even though we had put the order in when the first container was coming. But the good news is it's not imperative that we do that first, and actually it may be helpful for us to install a few of the bulkheads, not the ones that will span all the way across the bridge deck, but just a few of the ones inside the hull, because when we do go to adhere those pieces in, now there is a nice solid frame to hold everything in place as it should be. And also, because that batch of methacrylic that we're getting is going to be freshly made, it has a shelf life of 6 months, where before we may have had to order a new supply as the second container comes in. Now that should last us throughout everything we need. So that is really good. But before we get this started, I'm going to have Matt go into a few more details on the subject of interior bulkheads.
One of the things we did want to show you is how the bulkheads are laid out. Now this is our well dog-eared manual. Now some of them, like these bulkhead ones, it's just straight out of the box. We can put them in there, they're good to go. Some of them require some cutouts. So things in, the reason why it's not cut out in the factory is each owner is going to kind of vary. So it allows us to go through and customize it the way we want to. But this also, on some of them, will require some additional lamination. So again, bulkhead 1, we really don't have anything to do. I'll skip ahead to something like bulkhead 4. If we look at this with the door cutout, you'll see this grayed out area. And what that's telling us is we need to apply additional, it's 450 grams of double bias. So 45-45 cut, and that's going to help prevent any stress or issues where that cutout is. So we'll go through and do that later. Today we're working on bulkhead 2, which that's going to be behind a watertight bulkhead. That's going to be like where the sail storage is. We'll put fenders and that kind of stuff up there. The reason why we're starting on this one is because it's in an area that we're not going to see a ton. So let's learn here and make sure we make any mistakes. It's going to be in this area that we have to go through and redo.
The really good thing is, as we were going through with Max Cruise and designing our custom layout, they gave us the measurements of exactly what we need to make the cutouts in here. So for this side, I'm going to measure in 140 millimeters. I know that the bottom is going to be 900 millimeters down. It's all laid out for us. So now I just have to get those lines in place, and then we'll figure out the radius. And as you go through lesson learn, just did my pencil line here. Not very easy to see on this glossy side, so we're going to flip it over and start again. Strong woman competition. And now we have our square. Time to go on to the radius of the corners. The radius that it calls for is 78 millimeters. So I've got my tape measure out here, and I need to adjust this a little bit wider. We're going to work on this corner first, and so to do that, I'm going to actually get another line going between two of them. So I'm taking the point of my calipers here and putting it on the line that I initially drew. Going up to the top here, do another one. And then I'm also going to get it from this side here. Now I'm going to go to the highest part of each arch that I've drawn and then make a straight line from one point to the other. Now that I have my new line, I'm going to take the point where they intersect, put the tip of my caliper there, and that should give me the perfect radius I need of 78 millimeters, going from the initial lines of where we're going to cut out. And there you go. Well, I'd say that went pretty successfully considering I haven't handled a jigsaw in about 4 years now. So we got the one piece out. There was one corner I had a little mishap. It was my first one. I was just kind of like learning how the jigsaw worked, but the rest of it turned out pretty well. And now I get to do it again.
So Jess did an awesome job getting these all cut out with a jigsaw. Now it's my turn to go at it with a router. What we're doing is clearing out the foam in between these two pieces of fiberglass. Reason for that is if we left that exposed, the core exposed, you get water in there, but more importantly actually, what we're doing is we're adding back some of that rigidity that we lost when we started cutting this out. You cut out this panel, you leave these little small strips, it's not as strong as what it once was, we need that back. So what we're gonna do is the plans call for a 6 millimeter trough to be routed in here. We'll clear that out. In its place, we'll use unidirectional fiberglass, so just long strands of fiberglass. We'll roll that up into a rope shape and we will bond that into here. That's gonna actually add more rigidity than what that structure had, a little bit extra weight, but adds more rigidity back to this panel. Simple, easy to do, but it's a multi-step process. I've already set the router for this. For the correct depth, we're just using a rabbiting bit to clear that out with a 6 millimeter depth on it. Go through, simple, easy, not a big, hard job at all. All right, so that was the first cut. Because of each one of these bulkheads are different thickness. This one's 20 millimeters, some of them are 25, and I think actually even bigger than that. The router bit that I got is a little bit shorter, I guess we'd call it. So to do this, I'm gonna have to flip it over and do a second cut. Simple and easy to do again, but it follows that through. Again, this one, the depth is 6 millimeters. We do have other router bits for the deeper depths that we need to do in troughs and some of the other bulkheads, but works out well. Flip this over and then we can do the second side.
After 8 years of the nomadic life, involving crossing oceans in a 34-foot Sabre, refitting an aluminum boat, and then taking that to the Arctic Circle, we're back at it again with a brand new build. This is Matt, and I'm Jessica. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and join us every week as we start our newest project of building a 42-foot catamaran from the ground up. We're back at it for another day of bulkhead fun, and after cutting our trough yesterday with the router, we're now going to use our unidirectional fiberglass to just kind of put it in there and give it that extra strength it needs of what we took out. So we've gone through and there's a formula to find the width of what you need based on the trough. So we came out with 200 millimeters, and then we also calculated the circumference of it, which is 2720. And so now we're going to measure out our unidirectional to that before we get it into resin and start filling. Now we're getting to the really fun part. Kind of fun because it's something that we've never done before, so we don't know our skill level on this or how it's going to turn out. but we're at the point now where we're ready to wet down the unidirectional, roll it up, and shove it in there. We've also got little nails that we're gonna maybe use for tacks to keep it inside for right now, so wish us luck as we start on this. The first step was to wet the bulkhead trough with our resin. And we then took the same mixture and saturated our unidirectional fiberglass on the wetting station we had made on our table.
Okay. Oh, didn't look around there.
Rolling it into as tight of a rope as we could. And tips here would be appreciated. We have nowhere near mastered this skill yet.
Okay, so start that one right about there. Yep.
It was then laid out around the bulkhead to fill in the routed out gap. The nails we planned on tacking the rope in with weren't holding the unidirectional in place as well as we'd hoped, so I began to go back over it with more resin. And then we gave peel ply its chance to save the day. Things weren't falling apart, per se, but we were glad to have a go at the second bulkhead and
Make it work. Make it work. Make it work.
Put the bad boy in there.
finally we decided to resort to some good old clear packing tape to hold the fiberglass in until it had cured. We knew we'd need a better solution for the next round of bulkheads, but when you only have minutes to find a solution to your problem, you work with what you've got on hand. And spoiler alert, we did make a call to Max Crews at night to find out what they best recommended to keep the unidirectional held in place, so we would be properly armed the next time we went to do this job.
Not really impressed with our skill of putting in the unidirectional. Again, our first attempt at this, what we found we had to do is we had to wet the heck out of it before we could actually put it in there. It's pretty resin rich in most of the areas, but it's fine. It's good for that. On these, we were thinking we could just tack it into place or tape it into place to hold it. On all of our doors that we're going to do, the plan is to use strips of flexible plastic and put little screw holes through that or nail holes through that, and then push that into the foam to create kind of like a cofferdam or a mold and hold it into place all the way around the door opening. Well, that would have worked great for this, and we should have practiced on this first because it's cosmetically is not perfect at all. So we next step basically is going to be building coves over this, taping it to hold it into place. So it'll look fine then, but yeah, it just did not go as smoothly. It was a very sticky mess. Finally got cleaned up, and we'll move on to other projects now.
The other work Matt is referring to is beginning to move forward on our two larger bulkheads, number 4 and 5. Spanning the entire width of our catamaran, once installed, they will consist of the door leading between the head and the V-berth and the guest hall, and leading into the head and the shower in our owner's hall.
Crazy.
It's in your face.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Right.
I think so. We'll just see where this barbecue shine.
Not that Jess didn't do a wonderful job yesterday with the jigsaw, but this is going to require just a bit more consistency with the next process. What we're doing is we're cutting out the doorways and making the doors for each one of the bulkheads that are, of course, going to be in our living space. So we're going to see them on a day-to-day basis, and it's easier to make them all match perfectly, because then I can make all the trim and everything based off of just one door and then duplicate it multiple times. So to do that, to make the template, just got a piece of MDF, cut it down to the proper width and length, and then we'll radius our corners on each side with the jigsaw. I'm going to cut them a little bit wide, and then we'll sand back so we get a nice perfect curve along there. But yeah, it should be real simple and easy. The only thing that's a little bit different is because we're going to run the router bit to cut this out is going to be on the outside of this. We had to take the measurements that they had and subtract basically 1/2 inch on each side. So 1 inch on each side, top and bottom. And then for the radius, we've also had to compensate for that as well. So we'll cut this out, then we should be able to lay this directly on each one of those bulkheads and get a mirror image one after another and make it almost like production line. Well, that's basically it. So this little bearing here is going to ride along the edge of this template and cut through the foam, and it should give us a perfectly clean and smooth door then, this part, one that pops out, and then the door opening will be nice and smooth and symmetrical then. And again, that's going to be the big thing about being able to make all of our moldings, all those pieces, all with the same dimensions and everything like that. So it's not having to sit there and measure it every single time. All 3 of the doors are going to be identical to each other on the boat. Right about here. Open this way. That's basically our door.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. And just as promised, we're going to go over a few of the most asked questions from last video, or most commented on topics. Let's see, I'll start it off with the piping bags to use to put the filler in. We actually do have some of those, and we definitely plan to use them later, like for the methacrylate that's going to bond all of the hull pieces together. But Matt didn't want to use them just for this project of filling.
Yeah, I find it easier to use just one of the scrapers, and that way I can physically push it in there more and control it a little bit better. At least I feel I can. I feel like I get a little bit more depth with that versus trying to squeeze it in with the piping bags.
Yep, so we do have those, and they definitely are planned to use later. And then another comment that came up a lot is, why are we using vinyl ester with the boat instead of epoxy?
Yeah, 100 reasons for it. For and against, obviously, that versus epoxy, vinyl ester versus epoxy, and I'm not going to go into all those. But really the main reason is the boat is built in vinyl ester. It's vinyl ester infused foam core. And it just makes sense to stick with the actual, the resin that's used in the rest of the boat.
And then another actually good tip that we had from the last video, because Matt couldn't find the rollers that he wanted for the resin. The trays.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, he had the rollers. Is to use like paper plates. And although Matt has gotten the trays since then, and we've been cleaning them after every use, when we want something quick and disposable, paper plates actually sound like a great idea. So thank you for that tip. And was there anything else?
I think that was the most asked or made statements on the video.
That was. So thank you so much for all those comments and questions. Keep them rolling, and hopefully you'll see us doing this again next week.
Give me your freedom. Whoa, yeah, to pieces. Yeah, I need it. Once you're pandemonium, life is so easy. Whoa. your pandemonium.